All right, welcome back. Today we're diving deep into 5 incredibly powerful and honestly challenging chapters from the book of Ezekiel. We're going to unpack some intense prophecies of judgment, some really dramatic symbolic actions, and one of the most amazing promises in the entire Bible, the promise of a new heart. So here's our roadmap. We're going to move chapter by chapter to see how this whole prophetic story unfolds. We'll start with a tense showdown with corrupt leaders and end up with a devastating parable about a useless vine. It's quite a journey. So we kick things off in chapter 11. In a vision, Ezekiel finds himself right back in Jerusalem, face to face with the city's corrupt leadership. And these guys, they are just filled with this incredibly dangerous sense of confidence. They truly believe they're untouchable, totally safe from the coming Babylonian invasion. You see, the leaders had this little saying that just perfectly summed up their arrogance. This city is the cauldron, and we are the flesh. They felt totally secure, totally protected. And what's so fascinating is how God takes that very metaphor and just flips it right back on them. In their minds, they were the choice cuts of meat, safe and sound inside the protective pot of Jerusalem. But God just shatters that illusion. He says, oh, the city is a cauldron, all right, but the flesh boiling inside isn't you. It's the bodies of the innocent people you've killed. And he promises to drag these leaders right out of their safe pot and bring them to justice. But out of that judgment comes this incredible message of hope. While punishment is coming for the wicked, God makes this stunning promise to the faithful exiles. He says he's going to give them a new spirit and perform what is basically a divine heart transplant, replacing their hard, rebellious, stony heart with a soft, receptive heart of flesh that can actually follow him. Now in chapter 12, things get physical. God's words aren't sinking in, so he tells Ezekiel to stop just speaking the prophecy and to start acting it out. What he does next is basically a piece of performance art, some street theater with a terrifying message. I mean, just imagine seeing your neighbor do this. By day, he's packing his bags for everyone to see. Then at night, he starts digging a hole through the wall of his own house and crawls out with his face covered. He's putting on this show for what the text calls a rebellious house, a people who have eyes but just refuse to see. Every single step is a living parable of how the king and the people still in Jerusalem will try and fail to escape the city's destruction. You see, the people had gotten cynical. They had this little proverb they'd use to just dismiss all the warnings. It was basically like saying, yeah, we've heard it all before, and nothing ever happens. They were comfortable. But God's response is like thunder. He declares, the time for waiting is over. What I said was going to happen is going to happen, and it's happening now. So you have to ask, right? Why were the people so complacent? How could they ignore warnings that were that traumatic? Well, chapter 13 gives us the answer plain and simple. They were listening to the wrong people. They were being tricked into a false sense of security by false prophets. God uses another brilliant metaphor here. He says the nation is like a crumbling wall. A true prophet's job is to fix the foundation, to call out the sin that's making it weak. But the false prophets, they just slap a cheap coat of whitewash over the cracks, what the text calls untempered mortar. It just hides the problem. It looks good for a minute, but it provides zero real strength, which means the wall is guaranteed to collapse when the storm comes. At the end of the day, the false prophets were popular because they told people exactly what they wanted to hear. They were just prophesying their own wishful thinking, promising peace at the very moment disaster was about to hit. They sold comforting lies instead of the hard truth, and it led the whole nation straight to ruin. In chapter 14, the diagnosis of the problem goes even deeper. The issue isn't just about listening to the wrong people outside. It's a fundamental problem of worship. It's an issue of what's going on inside the heart. So get this. The elders of Israel, the leaders, they come to Ezekiel looking for a word from God. On the outside, they look totally righteous, but God sees right through it. He says they have set up their idols in their heart. They were going through all the right religious motions, but their real loyalty, their actual trust, was in something else entirely. And this inner corruption leads to this huge, really sobering question. What if there are a few genuinely good, righteous people left in a land that is otherwise completely corrupt? Can their goodness protect the rest of the nation from judgment? God's answer is, wow. It's such a stark lesson in personal accountability. He names this legendary righteous trio, Noah, Daniel, and Job, and says that even if that spiritual all-star team were in the land, their goodness could only save themselves. It couldn't save a nation that was determined to sin. Everybody is responsible for their own heart. And that all brings us to the final, absolutely devastating summary of Jerusalem's condition in chapter 15. The argument is laid out in a short, sharp parable that leaves zero room for debate. It's inescapable. So God sets up the whole thing with a simple question to Ezekiel. He says, hey, think about a grapevine. Compared to all the other trees in the forest, like a big, strong oak or cedar, what is the wood from a vine actually good for? And the logic here is just brutally clear. You can't build anything with grapevine wood. It's flimsy and twisted. You can't even carve a simple little peg from it to hang something on. A vine is good for one thing, and one thing only, to bear fruit. And if it doesn't do that, its only other use is as kindling for a fire. So the parallel for Jerusalem is just crushing. God's chosen vine had stopped producing the fruit of faithfulness. By failing at its one and only purpose, it had become useless. It was only fit for the fire of judgment. What a terrifying conclusion to this whole prophetic sequence. So you see this incredible progression, right? From the false security of a cooking pot, to the false comfort of a whitewashed wall, to the hidden idols inside the heart, and finally to the complete and utter uselessness of a fruitless vine. It's this timeless warning about the danger of failing to live out your purpose. And it forces us to ask ourselves, what fruit are we meant to produce? And what is the fire that consumes us when we fail?